If you are a fan of hope, we see some reason for it in Colorado's COVID numbers. Hope mixed with caution and realism.
I'm not ready to call this that we're done or that we're heading the right direction yet.
We tackle your next question about what happens to masks once we have a vaccine. Denver is going to come out of this pandemic changed in people and in places. A famous one is closing for good. For good, that is why neighbors gathered. To the extent that we do that anymore, they gathered to show a man some simple goodness. You can say that's not news. Okay, it's not news. It's next. Colorado's healthcare workers, stretched to the limit for weeks now, are seeing slight relief. Record levels of hospitalizations for COVID-19 may be trending down as we wait this week to see if Thanksgiving gatherings are going to show up and have an impact on hospitalizations. The numbers ticked up today to 1,643 patients, but the 5 days preceding saw a decided drop of more than 200 patients. Our Steve Steger spent the day trying to figure out if that's a solid trend or just a blip.
In a hospital system that was close to drowning, a 5-day decrease in the state's hospital COVID population is something of a life preserver.
Gives us a chance to sort of catch our breath a bit and, get ready for the surge that we'd still anticipate happening from our Thanksgiving holiday.
Dr. Darlene Taddy is the Vice President of Clinical Affairs with the Colorado Hospital Association.
Generally, the rates of hospitalizations will follow the community cases or the community positivity rate within about 2 or 3 weeks. As we saw those coming down for a little bit, we were hopeful that we would see the same downtrend with hospitalizations.
And it happened, though infectious disease expert Dr. Michelle Barron with UC Health says it isn't necessarily a sign that things will start slowing down.
A week is probably not long enough for us to really declare this a true trend. It's hopeful. Certainly, I think we all would take the news that we're declining. I think we sort of have conditioned ourselves to think it has to be a linear curve, and there's people involved, so there's never going to be a linear curve.
Barron agrees that this dip is a good opportunity to get ready for an anticipated Thanksgiving surge later this week.
I think we fall on the side of being conservative, and we'll presume it's going to happen so that we're adequately prepared for that.
It means that we're not bringing in our folks who are moonlighting, or we're able to keep our Jeopardy pool at home so that they can actually get the break that they need, the rest.
So why are they so concerned about that Thanksgiving surge? Taddy says this is all about trends. You had increases in cases and hospitalizations after holidays like the 4th of July. So they look back at days like that to compare to today. Some positive news out of all this. Barron says the data from spring to now shows that hospital stays have been cut in half in that time. So that's good news. People are spending less time in the hospital, Kyle, than they were at the beginning.
Yeah, just tremendous news on that front, Steve, because again, as your folks are telling you, it means some respite for these healthcare workers so that when you go in, not only do you get the best of treatment, which we're doing a lot better at, but you get somebody who is fresh and well rested there to care for you. I love, though, what Dr. Barron talked about in terms of not fooling ourselves into thinking that the backside of this peak will look like the backside of the spring peak, because the concern might be that Thanksgiving, then Christmas, you build a plateau.
Yeah, and she says if you zoom in on that trend line and watch it the whole way through, you don't see a lot of this. You see a lot of little ups and little downs throughout the course of the whole thing. So it's hard to be fooled, or you shouldn't be fooled, she says, by a little dip here, especially after we've seen such a large increase leading up to now.
All right, Steve Sager, as always, real news, fake plant. Thank you. One of the 1,643 Coloradans currently hospitalized with the virus is the governor's partner, Marlon Reese. Within the half hour, the governor's office released a statement saying that Reese has not needed oxygen treatment. He's been treated with remdesivir, got some dexamethasone for inflammation, and he's doing pretty well in the hospital. The governor drove Reese to the hospital on Sunday after his cough got worse. He was having trouble breathing. Up until then, the governor's office said that Polis and Reese only had mild symptoms. They tested positive for the virus 2 days after Thanksgiving. The governor's spokesperson said that the first gentleman is doing well in the hospital, and we're told that Polis himself not experiencing any additional symptoms at this point. He's just waiting for the doctor's all clear to go back to work. Had some virtual bill signing ceremonies today, and he could be cleared to return to work in person by Wednesday. So we saw the percentage of tests coming back positive trend down toward the end of November, but it's gone steadily back up as we begin this month. Latest positivity rate is now 12.3%, just a tick over our weekly average. Yesterday, Colorado added more than 3,800 new cases of COVID-19. Last 7 days, we have averaged 4,300 plus, so hopefully we get a downward trend that holds there. And again, this week, crucial, waiting to see what the numbers do as the Thanksgiving impact happens. So we're losing almost 40 Coloradans a day from the virus. It is a new record high set almost every day. And again, the reminder that down drop at the end of the graph there is not real. The records lag because the deaths are not reported immediately. So we look back like a week or so to get an idea of where we are. And by this measure, in terms of deaths, Colorado is still in the worst stretch of the pandemic so far. So we pause today to remember the attack on Pearl Harbor. The 2,400 Americans lost 79 years ago today, and then the war that followed. And we are today engaged, of course, in another global struggle. Pandemic is not war, not the same thing. But there are echoes in the calls for politics to be set aside for our shared purpose. So I read back through some copies of old Colorado newspapers today, the days following the Pearl Harbor attack, as Coloradans learned of the losses, and Colorado steeled itself for war. I found the same unsigned commentary in a few small-town papers, including the Ray Gazette and the Palisade Tribune. Words applicable, I think, to our current situation that make pretty clear how far short we have fallen in rising to meet, as one, our current shared challenge in the pandemic. Here in America, the task is clear. This commentary read, the American people will support their government to the limit and they will make whatever sacrifices prove necessary. This commentary continued. From this time on, it is the job of all to show the world that a free America is more than a match for any adversary. In 2020, it is difficult to say that America has been a real match for the adversary of the virus, not compared to other countries. Yet those words from 1941 offered this encouragement I think we could all still use. Let there be no despair. Let there be instead uncompromising determination. Tonight's next question comes to us from a viewer named Dan. He wants to know, with the vaccine on the horizon, will those who get immunized still need to wear masks afterward? Dan, we got you an answer from 9 Health expert Dr. Pyle Coley.
In order for us to slow the spread of the virus using vaccination, at least 70% of us have got to develop immunity. So by the time we immunize 70% of Colorado's 5.75 million people population, it will take some time. So everybody won't be able to get vaccinated on the same day. So even if you've been vaccinated, you do need to wear masks to protect yourself from others and to protect others from you. Number two, we don't actually know if you're vaccinated, whether it just protects the host or it also prevents transmission of the virus. In other words, can you still transmit the virus to others if you've been vaccinated? This is a scientific unknown at this time. And for that reason, we have to keep wearing masks until we can answer this question. My best guess as to what's going to happen is that we're going to be wearing masks for at least another year, possibly longer.
So masks are going to be stocking stuffers is what I heard there. Hey, you ready to hear the grand total of what you raised for Family Tree last week? That nonprofit that helps homeless families in our community in the metro area get into safe housing. That nonprofit now has more than $48,000 in additional funding thanks to you. $48,000 of your donations to help them combat the linked causes of family homelessness, child abuse, and domestic abuse. I talked to some of the folks at Family Tree today. They said that they were amazed by your generosity. I was not amazed because I know how much so many of you have made the Word of Thanks microgiving campaign a highlight of your week. But I too continue to be just in awe of your generous spirit. We are coming up pretty close indeed to the $2 million mark raised together for Colorado's nonprofits since June. I have an idea for Wednesday that I think you'll love. One of Colorado's closest elections finally ends and a Republican win. A law and order type prepares to take office with some thoughts about whether we can trust our elections.
Their influence on the Denver music scene is essentially what has created such an inviting place for musicians to come up.
Denver changed around that place for generations. Now, the legendary spot played by the greats is closing. Next. One of Colorado's closest elections wrapped up over the weekend. Close elections, of course, are not unusual. They are not suspicious, and they are not a crime. They happen. When it's close, you count the votes. If it's close enough, you recount the votes, and then, usually, a statesman or stateswoman calls their opponent to concede, like Democrat Amy Padden did this weekend when it was clear that Republican John Kellner was going to be the next district attorney for Douglas and surrounding counties. 1,400 votes or so was the difference out of more than 500,000 cast. Kellner's margin of victory is likely to be less than 0.25%. As the president of Kellner's party stokes false claims that elections are rigged, Kellner defended Colorado systems.
I feel blessed that I actually did get to go and see this part of it, is that we've got a dang good process in Colorado, one that people can really trust. You know, in a race that saw, I think, 570,000 plus ballots, you know what the net shift after the recount was? It was about 8 votes across all of those in 4 different counties run by 4 different clerks with 4 different, election staffs.
One of my favorite things is when you get on the Zoom and you've got the light behind your head, so it's like, oh, he kind of had that going on there. He was the chief deputy district attorney for the 18th Judicial District under Republican George Brockler for the last 7 years. Brockler is term limited. Kellner takes over on January 12th.
You might be asking yourself, what month is it again? Temperatures in the 50s and 60s for the second day in a row? Well, as you know, it won't last. We're tracking a storm system that will bring some cold weather, potentially snow by the end of the week. This evening, though, temperatures will be quite comfortable. Not a lot to show you on the future cast, but things will be changing as we move through Thursday night into Friday with a low pressure system off the coast of California, combining forces with a front to the north. And that means the potential for accumulating snow Thursday into Friday, and not just for the mountains, but right here in the Denver metro area. But one more day with temperatures just like this, and then things all start to change for us. And so as we move through tonight, mostly clear and 29 degrees will be your low. Tomorrow's high above average by about 20 degrees. Cooler on Thursday with a chance for light snow Friday into Saturday, and then temperatures rebounding back to the 50s late in the weekend and for the first part of next week.
So the bad things that happen every day never seem to have any trouble making it onto the evening news. How about a headline about human decency? It comes to us from South Denver. There's an older man who lives there who's been out in his yard a lot trying to cut down this big uprooted tree. He was scared the thing was going to fall on his house, hurt him or his wife. He was not able to finish the job, so a ton of neighbors came out to do it for him over the weekend. Karen, who posted the call to help on Facebook, said all the strangers that came out on a Saturday were a great showing of love in a tough year. Denver is losing a legendary music spot that dates to the days when you couldn't legally drink there.
There are still tunnels connecting El Chapultepec and Ophelia's and some of the other venues and locations around there because that's how old it was. It was a speakeasy.
Farewell to a piece of the Denver that was. Another loss in the pandemic. Next. You could walk out of a Rockies game in Lodo, and amidst all the thumpiness of most of the places in that neighborhood these days, the sound of jazz would always be floating out onto the street from one open door. The door of El Chapultepec was open to musicians and to listeners, famous and otherwise, since the 1930s. That legendary jazz club, that piece of old Denver, is going away. Our Byron Reed has the story.
And all the night's magic.
For full-time vocalist Jessica Jones,
I've been singing for 13 years now.
performing music is where she most feels at home.
It's what makes me feel comfortable in my own skin, and it's how I found a community was through that art.
I can remember the rain in December, the leaves are brown.
A community Jones found singing at a legendary jazz club in Lower Downtown.
Oh, I've been singing at El Chapultepec for 13 years, and then I had a residency there with the Tony Black Summit every Sunday night.
El Chapultepec Jazz Club, also known as the Peck, has lived in the heart of Lower Downtown since the 1930s.
I know that Jack Kerouac hung out there and wrote about it in On the Road Again.
It was a familiar stop-off for musicians from around the world.
But there are still tunnels connecting El Chapultepec and Ophelia's and some of the other venues and locations around there because that's how old it was. It was a speakeasy. I would meet people coming right off of shows at Red Rocks, and I played with people from the Delphonics and the Platters.
But after 87 years, the jazz club is closing its doors for good, in part due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
I really hope we can keep Herbs and Dazzle open and some of these staples because that scene needs to live on.
Jones hopes she and others can continue to foster the jazz scene in Denver.
I like to think of myself as like a born and bred El Chapultepec kind of a musician.
As a tribute to a home she loves.
El Chapultepec, after 7 years of a residency there, felt like my living room. And getting to see all of those same people every week was so special.
For next,
the world is losing this club, not just Denver.
I'm Byron Reed.
Bill signed by the governor this morning offers financial aid to music venues and to arts organizations with an eye to helping small independent venues, just like El Chapultepec. So we have celebrated our holiday fails around here for years. Next, we have the first one that involves a septic system. We will keep this tasteful, I promise you, and it's quite the story. That and your feedback next. If you're looking for that perfect gift for your significant other, trying to plan the perfect socially distanced holiday event, forget the perfect. It's the thought that counts. Your fails are more fun anyway. You share them each year, like the time that Rebecca tried to make a traditional English Christmas meal complete with the goose. Geese aren't that big. She said actually there was barely any meat on it, so everybody only got a bite or two of goose, and the rest of the English meal didn't go over much better. Still beats Kathy's Christmas many years ago. She said that she had more than 30 family members crammed into her house, her one bathroom house. You can see where this is going, where they were going, because it caused the septic tank to fill, and before long, they were shuttling people to a restroom at a nearby gas station to go. And Kathy's husband and son spent the holiday weekend digging out the septic tank. Keep sharing your holiday fails, recent or years old. Helps if you have photos or video. Email next@9news.com or give us a shout with the hashtag HeyNext. Friend on Twitter writes in to say, I've heard people say the governor's partner all day long in reference to him being sick. Why not say the governor's husband? I just defer to language that they use. That's what Marlon and the governor call each other, their partner. So that's the word that I use. Chelsea says, new suit, Kyle. It's not. According to the card I keep in the pocket, I wore it on October 10th, 1919, January 9th, March 7th, and October 20th. I have a problem, I know. Dave Kozlowski says about the beard, you going for the Don Jr. look, Kyle? Pardon? See you next time.